Welcome to The Conflict Coach with Dr. Emily Taylor. I'm a mediator, developmental psychologist, and married mother of 5. I also teach conflict resolution classes. And like you, I've dealt with a lot of conflict in my own life. And I used to think I could make it all go away if I improved conditions or changed myself. But I've realized that conflict is just part of life. We all need more effective tools to handle it with confidence. So that's what this podcast is about. Each episode, you'll hear me coach a real person through a real conflict in their life. As you listen, you'll notice that I'm not telling them what to do. I'm giving them a set of skills that can apply to any conflict, including the ones in your life. So let's get started. I'm joined today by Erika. She's a young mom. Her husband's in grad school. She has 2 little kids. And she mentioned that she's really having struggles around mealtime. It's the repetitive conflict coming up. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like for her and maybe how she can work through it. Erika, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you coming. And we had chatted just briefly about, conflicts you're facing in parenting with 2 little children and having a really busy life. Is there a specific, situation recently where some of these challenges came up that you could tell us about?
Yeah, so I think because my children are so important to me, it can be really difficult for me to give up control over how me and my husband take care of them. And so a specific example is, and maybe it's kind of trivial, but it's one that comes up a lot, is at dinner time, because we eat that meal as a family. My husband often helps our older child eat her dinner, and I often find myself critiquing him inside. Like, I think that bite is too big for her. She might choke on that. Or I think he values, or he thinks it's important that she finishes all of her food, and I think it's more important that she listens to her body and tells us when she's done eating, even if she didn't finish everything in her bowl. And so that's a challenge that comes up for us sometimes. Sometimes I say something like, I think she's done. She said she's full, so let's just be done. And other times I bite my tongue because I think, well, he's the parent too, and I don't have full control over this because we're sharing the responsibility of raising our children. So I should let him raise the girls how he thinks he should too. But then I think it starts to kind of build up inside and then come out in other ways.
Okay, so I'm at least you can correct me if I'm wrong, but so I'm hearing you say that sometimes you don't say anything. So there's like you mentioned, like biting your tongue, or just like the thought comes to you and you're kind of feeling inside like this conflict within you, and then other times maybe you do voice it, but it sounds like maybe it's a little bit of a debate at times. Is that how would?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think I'm reading the mood too. Like, if I know he's had a long day, I'm less likely to kind of get at him for little things that I wish he'd do differently. And other times when the mood is light, it's easier to be like, I think that bite's too big. Or, well, she's had a lot. She had a big lunch, so maybe it's fine if she doesn't finish her food.
Sure.
It's easier for me to say something. There have been a few times where I'll bring it up, maybe not a few, maybe like once or twice, where I'll bring it up outside of the dinner table. I'll say like, hey, I've been learning more about parenting young children, and I'm learning that it's really important that we teach our girls to listen to their bodies, and I can have those kinds of conversations outside, but it doesn't seem to translate to the dinner table.
Okay.
So
okay.
I'm trying these different methods and I'm not really seeing change, but like I also know that the change I'm wanting is my way, right?
Okay.
So
okay.
I get that. Like, what I'm looking for isn't happening, but maybe because I'm only looking for a very specific outcome. There's like the struggle within myself. Like, should I be, like give up this control and let him parent this way? And that's okay if I don't like everything. But then there's also, I'm fighting what he's doing too. And I still feel my opinions coming up, and there's conflict there too.
Sure. So, I mean, again, I think there's the conflict within, like you're saying, and then there's the conflict with the other person. One thing that was interesting while you're talking about it, because you brought it up, and I actually felt the same way when I was, parenting my kids when they were really young, was like, this doesn't seem like a big thing, right? But we have meals, at least 3 times a day. If you have little kids, sometimes it seems even more. So it's this repetitive situation that keeps coming up. And it isn't just about food, right? Like, I know you mentioned from your perspective,
Definitely.
there's this control, but I heard you talk about your daughter's body image, like kind of like over time. So it's interesting how a small daily thing does represent maybe larger values. What are the values that you see behind that conflict?
That's a good question. I think you mentioned one of them with like having healthy body image.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel like I want them to have autonomy over their bodies and what they're doing with them. And so I think that's another big thing that comes up for me um, in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's anything else. I think maybe a little bit of like respect. Like I want our parent-child relationship to be one where they have an opinion and they can say things that they're thinking or feeling, and we're going to respect that and try to accommodate where we can and work together, not just what we said. So that's the law.
Sure.
I don't want to parent that way. So that's probably part of it too.
Okay. So you want to work as a partnership, but it's not always easily done. Maybe. I'm just speaking from my own experience, but
no, that's definitely how it is.
Yeah. What's something that, you mentioned having tried to talk to him before about this topic or something related. What do you wish he would understand that you think he doesn't understand right now?
I don't know if it's understand as much as feel. I think what I'm wanting is for him to feel the same way about this issue. I want him to also see this as like a body image thing or an autonomy thing or a relational respect kind of a thing. But instead, I think he just sees it as it's a meal. They need to eat their food so that they're not hungry before they go to bed. And it's very simple in his mind. But for me, there are these underlying deeper things that it's tied to or that they're symbolic of. And I think that the what I tell myself is that, well, if he understood that these are all connected, then he would care about this as much as I do, and maybe he'd be more likely to change. But because he doesn't see it that way, even though I say we should do it this way or can we do it this way instead, it doesn't seem to stick. But I think it's because it's not that big of a deal to him. It's just dinner.
So listener, I just want to jump in here. I'm going to do this periodically during coaching sessions. You may also be in a conflict where the other person doesn't perceive it as a big deal, or they actually don't perceive it as a conflict at all, or vice versa. This is because the conflict actually may not be about that trivial thing. It may actually be something deeper. So our first work is to look at what our values are and see if perhaps there's a link, and then be able to share that with the other person. So let's see how that goes with Erika. Okay, so he sees it as just dinner. What do you think you've tried to say? Have you tried to relay it in the way that not just an alternative solution, or have you talked about what underlying values, what it means to you, maybe not just to the girls?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I have, but that'd be a great question to ask him if that's actually come across in my communication with him. I think that I could probably be more explicit. I've never laid it out for him like that. Like, well, it's tied to their autonomy and their this. And from my point of view, I've never said it that explicitly. So maybe he's missing that deeper meaning that this issue holds for me.
Do you mind just telling me a little bit more about what the issue means to you personally, not even to your daughters?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, so oftentimes, I guess just this is my own experience, but when we're parenting, oftentimes we're like the behaviors we want to have happen with our children are actually like they're a reflection of us and what we want. If you were talking just to yourself, like how do you want, your meals or your like respect for your body or autonomy over your body? What's the right situation for you? Maybe I guess just looking at self first before we look at those outside of ourselves.
It's really interesting you say that. It's really interesting you say that it's tied to like my reflection of myself, because I think that's I think you're totally right. That resonates with me. I think that I feel so strongly about my daughters. Maybe because they're daughters and I'm a woman too, but like feeling like they have control over their bodies and what happens to them. Sorry.
No,
I'm
don't.
the crazy type of person.
No.
So.
It sounds like it's intensely personal, like for you, that maybe each woman needs to know that they can be respected and they can make choices for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what it is for me. And so I can see how my personal, just by you talking about this with me, I can see how that's playing a role in how strongly I feel about this. Because when I just say the facts out loud, I think like, well, this is such a silly issue. It's just dinner, you know, like, is it really going to affect them? But I think you're right that because of my own personal experiences, this issue of autonomy and control over your body is really important to me. And so that's definitely influencing how I'm seeing this issue.
Again, sorry to I know these are kind of like the deeper feelings, but what's interesting, and just with the background in conflict resolution, I think the first work that we do is definitely figure out what not only the need, but like what's the source, our emotions, and I actually think the tension of conflict it's like exposure of something in our souls. There's something in us that's kind of rubbing the wrong way, and we can attend to it by trying to make it go away as fast as possible, right? Like until the next meal happens, I'm going to bite my tongue, or I'm going to just, suck it up this time, or I'm tired, so I'm actually going to say something. But it's interesting when we're deliberate about what our values are and we express the reason behind the behavioral choices we make or the things that we say kind of in the moment.
Yeah, I really like that. I've never done that before. Like, I've thought about this issue a lot, and I've never turned it on myself and said, like, well, what does this mean for me as a person, or how, like, I guess I've always just seen it as this issue with my girls and their dad. But turning it on myself helps me to see how maybe this is actually an issue with myself and has nothing to do with the girls.
Yeah. Or, I mean, one way to look at it too, it's not necessarily an issue. I think seeing it as a value and a need, as opposed to just something that you might want or might be nice to have. It might be nice if my husband listened to me. Like, you can make it a different, like there's overlapping values, right? One is control or respect, but it sounds like maybe the core issue is that you and any woman would have autonomy to make those choices, even on a day-to-day basis, not just in the big choices. I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking about. You tell me if that's at all at all resonates, or how you differ from that.
Totally. Yeah. No, I think you nailed it. I think that's totally it.
Say I am your husband. What do you want to tell him about what this means to you?
Yeah, I think I would say, you know how I kind of nag you at dinner time about how you're feeding the girls? I've learned that it's because the girls having autonomy over their bodies is really important to me. And I get that maybe you don't see it that way, but for me, when we're forcing them to finish their food, it feels like they don't have for me, it seems like they don't have control. And I wish it'd be great if we could find a way that they could, eat enough food to be healthy, but also be able to be the ones that say yes or no about like what's going to happen with their bodies.
Oh, I'm just pretending to be him. I didn't realize this was
sure.
And if it's okay, we'll keep doing a little bit of the role play. I didn't realize this was such like you had such strong feelings about this. I thought it was just more like just about the food. Can you tell me a little bit more why this is so important? Like I heard you talk about like autonomy and like people not forcing you to do things, but I'm just trying to understand because that's just hasn't been my experience.
Sure. Thanks for asking.
Sure.
I think I don't want to overgeneralize, but my experience as a woman has been that sometimes I don't feel like I always have that choice, or I have to be very protective of that choice because it can be taken away. And I think I just don't want our girls to experience that, even though they might. But at least like in our home, which I can control, I don't want them to have that kind of experience.
So but you're not just talking about the food part. It seems like you're talking about more. What? Can you help me understand that?
Sure.
I'm not sure.
I think, yeah, and this might be where, like, maybe I'm just being kind of dramatic because I think in general we're really good at respecting
Sure.
I think we're really good at respecting their bodies. So I don't know that there's a bigger thing that we need to change, but for some reason with this food issue, it just like comes up for me, even though I'm not seeing a pattern or anything in the way that we're parenting. In general, I think we do really good at helping them to have their own choices and make their own decisions about their bodies and what they're going to do.
If we were doing it in a better way that wouldn't be upsetting, what would that look like?
I think it would just be letting them like be done eating when they're done eating. And I know with our oldest child that can be really hard because it seems like then she'll never eat because she takes 1 or 2 bites and then she says she's full and then she wants dessert, you know? So I get that that's difficult. But I think, I mean, there have been a few times in the past where we just say like, well, if you want dessert, we have to finish the food in our bowl first. You know, if you're too full, that's fine. You don't need to eat it. But if you're going to have space for ice cream, then there's probably space for dinner. So I think just doing something like that. And of course, I'd be open to hearing what you think about how we can help our girls have the ability to make decisions, but also have some sort of boundary so they're not just, you know, eating whatever they want, whenever they want.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear if you have any ideas too.
Okay. Well, thanks for explaining kind of where you're coming from. But yeah, I definitely want to see if it works and then be able to talk with you again, see where we can go from there. So just again, thanks for humoring me with that. It's sometimes hard to just, role play and imagine. But Erika, you just shared like some pretty profound like values, important values. And I think it's interesting that you were able, even in kind of in this, more contrived scenario, to imagine that conversation that you could have with your husband. And it doesn't sound like it would be, it's not that, is it far-fetched, or can you imagine having that conversation?
I can imagine myself saying these things. I don't know that his responses would be as similar to yours.
What do you think?
You're very empathetic.
No. What do you think he would say? So if it wasn't, this, we're not always perfect listeners, right?
Oh yeah, of course. And I'm not either. So I hate, I don't want to make him sound so bad. But I think he'd say something like, "Wow, you're getting really emotional about this. Like, this is, wow." I don't know. I think that would, I think that would scare him a little bit. I've seen in the past when I get emotional about something, it kind of becomes a deterrent. Like, oh no, she's getting upset.
Okay.
But it's just me feeling strongly about something. But that, I think when he worries that I'm getting upset about something, it can kind of close off the conversation.
Okay.
So maybe it's good that we're practicing so I can, get the emotions out now, and then maybe when I have a real conversation about it, it'll be easier for me to talk about. I
was just thinking the content of a conflict, right, is like getting down to that value and like figuring out where it comes from. and laying claim to it. You're like, oh, this is really important to me. The other person maybe doesn't see that, and maybe I have or haven't explained it to them. Then I really do think it's the question of how to relay things. I actually grew up in a family where there are things like I would not, even with my husband, there are things I'm like, this is not going to go well if I try to have a verbal or like teary conversation about it. But it doesn't mean it shouldn't be expressed. I think especially in American culture, we're a very wordy culture, like talking and like verbally expressing ourselves. Like I thought even how when I was dating my husband, we actually were dating long distance for 6 months and we wrote back and forth. And it was interesting because he had come out of a bad relationship and like the verbal kind of scared him, like the in-person. But when we wrote, he had time to process and digest. Can you think of any times where you have had more successful, like understanding conversations or resolution and not through a conversation? Could be written or otherwise.
That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever considered that, like, there's other ways to communicate or to work through this than just like talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think written is good when I want to be really specific with my words. Like it's a really clear way for us to communicate with each other because we don't get lost in rambling or whatever. So I think that could work, like a long text or something about it. I think that we do pretty good at communicating just by talking, but I think it's just what I said before about conversations tend to go really well even when we don't see eye to eye on something. If I can kind of remove the emotion from it and we just talk about it from a logical point of view, and he brings up these points and I bring up these points, and then we're able to, kind of compromise and come to some sort of solution together. But when it starts to become emotional for me, for some reason, it becomes kind of scary for him. And then that's when
it's kind of a shutdown.
I feel like he kind of starts to turn away, and then I start to dig in my heels, and then it's like not a great it ends up not being very productive after that.
So listener, when you're having trouble communicating in a conflict, use what you already know about that person to tailor your message to their personality, their habits, and their preferences. That means if someone's warm and emotional, perhaps that kind of response back would be helpful to them. Or maybe rather than a face-to-face, it might be better to just do a walk where you're side by side. Just be mindful also of the timing. Has this person had a long day, or have you had a long day? All those things can go a long way in that communication through something that may be difficult. Let's get back to Erika.
I think sometimes, and in the past when I've brought up with my husband needs he doesn't really understand it. But like, is that something that I need to work on, is like understanding where my needs are coming from instead of just saying like, well, this is important to me, so please respect this, or please, XYZ. I guess what I'm saying is like, do you need to be able to like explain your needs? Like, is that something I should work on as a person?
I personally am really drawn to, there's a style of communication called nonviolent communication. And the whole idea of it is to be able to first identify, make an observation. So you notice, and you, like a scientist, you just say, I noticed when you're feeding our girls, it's really important. It seems important to you that they finish their entire meal. It's just an observation. So I noticed when you asked our girls to finish their plates, even if they weren't hungry, I kind of had this resentment started building in me. I'm concerned because I really need to know that my girls can make choices for themselves on a day-to-day basis, and especially about food and just how they have control over their bodies. I'm wondering if we could have a conversation, maybe tomorrow when we're going out to dinner with each other, just talking about how we could, work this out so I could get, some of my needs met about how I see, how to raise the girl, like help the girls eat, and then, from your perspective, how we can work that out. So what I just did was make an observation, then I express a personal need, a feeling connected to a need, and then I make a concrete positive request for action.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it'll be easier for me to have conversations with my husband using that method instead of like trying to coming at him from an emotional point of view. Like,
Sure.
This is why, like, just kind of being heavy that way. I think something that I personally want to implement is just that what you talked about with observation, like observing myself first, like asking myself, like, wow, why is this coming up for me? Or why is this so hard for me?
Well, Erika, we've covered a lot, and you've been super open and authentic, and I really appreciate that. I think we've been able to actually talk about, things that matter to us. I want you to know you got this. Everything we want is for you to be successful and to keep growing in your relationship with your husband and with your kids, and just appreciate your time so much today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, friends, what we just heard was very vulnerable and real. I don't know if you noticed that when Erika first started talking about the conflict, it was, she was kind of conversational, and she actually kind of put herself down in like, this is not really that important. This is kind of a stupid conflict. But then when we got a little bit deeper, and when she kind of laid claim to what the value was behind the feeding of her daughters, it was almost instantly emotional and deep. And I think a lot of us, we're riding on the surface. We're sensing inside like this tension, but we don't often address the things that really matter to us. And when we get to that core, then we can actually do something. So that's the first skill that I want you to take away from today. Do the personal work to figure out what the conflict is really about for you. Maybe do some journaling or talk it out with a trusted friend, but identify it, lay claim to it, and don't dismiss it. This will allow the other person to connect with you, even if it seems like they don't really care about that conflict, that superficial conflict. There's something deeper that means something to you. Learning to identify it and then address it with the other person is where that real connection is going to come about. The second thing I want you to take away also is use the knowledge that you have of that particular person's preferences for timing, use of emotion, the setting. Find what resonates with that person to be able to communicate through a conflict. And finally, if you're interested in learning more about nonviolent communication, I have some information in today's show notes. Thanks for joining me today. If there's someone in your life who might benefit from listening to this episode, please share it, because as I always say, it's not a question of if, but when we're going to experience conflict, and we do much better when we're prepared. The Conflict Coach with Dr. Emily Taylor is a BYU radio podcast. Check the show notes to see how we can connect on social media. And next time, I'll be coaching someone through a neighborhood conflict over parking. I hope you'll join me.